with the family, I hope you die in prison as well. You know, and if this was a death penalty state, you'd be getting the chair.
And I'll tell you point blank, I have not 1 ounce of remorse for Treesan's death.
This is Jeremy Christian, who was arrested for the murder of 2 men on a MAX light rail train in Portland, Oregon. In May 2017, Christian stabbed and killed 53-year-old retired Army officer Ricky John Best and 23-year-old Talisan Mirdan Namkai Mecha. He also stabbed 21-year-old Micah Fletcher, but he survived. What happens next is the moment where it all began. Christian was captured on tape screaming anti-Muslim and racist slurs at 2 black teenagers. His behavior didn't sit well with several passengers. They confronted him and barred him from the frightened teenagers who had moved to the back of the train. Further attempts to de-escalate the situation resulted in Christian brandishing a knife, threatening to stab, and eventually stabbing the victims. But it doesn't end there. Here is Christian leaving the scene. After his 12 seconds of madness, Christian fled the train at the next transit center. Several passengers followed him as they called 911. Eventually, the police arrived and he was arrested, boasting about how he killed 2 people. But killing 2 people in broad daylight isn't enough. It's what happened in court that left the judge and jury in disbelief. He was charged with 2 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. Not only did he show no remorse for his actions, he threatened to kill one of the relatives of a victim in court. During the trial, one of the victim's relatives read a victim's impact statement. This is Christian's response to the statement. Christian was eventually sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms. During the trial, evidence of his criminal past came to light. It appeared that Christian had assaulted a woman and shouted racial slurs on another train the day before the murders.
Oh, it's like we got a Christian or Muslim bus driver, I'll stab you too.
He was a self-described white nationalist and a far-right extremist. The judge added 25 years to his 2 life sentences for these other charges. However disrespectful Christian was, it was not as disrespectful as Randall Moore.
And I'll tell you point blank, I have not 1 ounce of remorse for Treesan's death.
We take you to Polk County courtroom where Randall Moore is facing trial for the murder of his ex-wife, Therese Ann Marie Lynch. In November 2011, Moore kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and killed Lynch. It all began when Lynch left Moore and filed a protective order against him, but Moore wasn't a man that let go easily. He kidnapped Lynch and set up a hostage situation. This is Officer Todd Rowland, who shot Moore as he responded to the cries from the apartment. This was moments after Moore shot Officer Rowland. Fortunately, he survived the shooting. In a phone call with 911, Moore explains why he murdered his wife.
You want me to tell you something?
Well, you can tell me whatever you want.
I didn't want to do any of this.
Okay.
But I'm telling you, all I wanted was my son. I just wanted to see my 7-month-old baby. That's all I cared about.
Eventually, the police were able to breach the house and arrest him. Moore nodded when Judge Joel Novak confirmed that he had been found guilty on all charges.
The court doesn't allow me to punish you any more than I'm doing now. If I could, I would.
The judge allowed the victim's family to read their victim impact statement. What happens next is one of the most disrespectful moments that have ever happened in a court of law, as Lynch's mother took to the stand and read a sorrowful statement. But Moore got in a few words. Listen as Moore interrupts Lynch's mother's victim impact statement.
He hated you. You're a loser.
But Moore wasn't done. When he was allowed to address the court, he showed no remorse for his crimes.
And I'll tell you point blank, I have not 1 ounce of remorse for Treesan's death.
And told the victims' families so. Moore also tried to justify his crimes. The only semblance of an apology from him was to Officer Todd, whom he shot.
Okay, 303 Adam has been hit, officer down.
However, Judge Novak had the last word. He berated Moore for his evil behavior and expressed shock at such a level of heartlessness.
The court doesn't allow me to punish you any more than I'm doing now. If I could, I would.
In the end, Moore was sentenced to 3 life sentences for the murder of Lynch and 25 years for shooting police officer Rowland. That is so many years to spend behind bars. But is it as bad as life sentences without the possibility of a parole? That was the case of Camilla Gamet. This is Camilla Gamet. The 31-year-old is in court for the murder of her 38-year-old boyfriend, Marcel Hill. The couple lived together in Michigan, and in May 2018, Gamet attacked her boyfriend in a rage. She smashed the entire apartment and used several items as weapons. The court heard that when the police arrived following calls from the neighbors, Hill was dead and Gamet was covered in blood. They recovered a bloody frying pan, a knife covered in blood, and a smashed floor lamp. Prosecutors said that she stabbed her boyfriend multiple times with a knife.
We have no choice but to send her where she will also die.
But Camilla wasn't finished there. Wait till you see how she defended her actions in the courtroom. During the trial, Gamet claimed that she thought that her boyfriend was an assailant or intruder, and that she stabbed him in self-defense. The defendant's story didn't stand up to scrutiny because she would have recognized the boyfriend or his voice. Gamet's version of the event could have convinced the judge if Hill had sustained 1 or 2 stab wounds. However, the evidence presented in court showed that Gamet stabbed Hill 12 times and hit him continuously with a frying pan.
You stab, you stab, you stab, you stab, you stab until he was dead.
Still, she insisted that it was all in self-defense and that she was a victim of their lies. Here is Gamet sticking to her story.
Basically, at trial, the way I was portrayed, mostly everything was lies. There was a little bit of truth, but mostly I was convicted off of lies.
Her claims did not impress Judge John McBain. Diana Banks, a member of Hill's family, was called by the court to deliver a victim's impact statement. What Gamet did as her victim's own mother took to the stand would send chills down your spine. As Hill's aunt read the statement, Gamet showed no remorse, rolled her eyes, and even smiled. When the aunt was done, Gamet reacted. This time, Judge McBain wasn't so nice and threatened to tape her mouth if she continued interrupting the woman.
You're gonna shut your mouth or I'm gonna have some duct tape put on it.
Well, he attacked
All right, we'll wait here for a moment till we can get her quiet.
The threat didn't stop Gamet. In the end, court officers could not find duct tape, and Aunt Diana was able to finish her statement, but Gamet's behavior has already angered the prosecutor. Before she was handed her sentence, Judge McBain told her what he thought about her and the crime she committed.
I agree with the family. I hope you die in prison as well. You know, if this was a death penalty state, you'd be getting a chair.
The court considered her history of domestic abuse, and Gamet was sentenced to life imprisonment without any possibility of parole. It only gets more disrespectful from here, and also with a similar sentence, we have Keith Allen Ferguson. This is 40-year-old Keith Allen Ferguson, who police said killed his wife, Tiffany Ferguson, and father-in-law, James Weber, in November 2014. Ferguson, who is from Kalkaska County, Michigan, is charged with 12 felony counts, which included first and second-degree murders and kidnapping. 42-year-old Tiffany Ferguson has moved to end her 17 years of marriage with Keith Ferguson. During an argument about the divorce, Keith assaulted Tiffany, shot and killed her as their 4 kids watched. Unmoved, Keith drove the kids to Tiffany's parents' house, where he fatally shot Tiffany's father. After murdering his father-in-law, Keith ran to a neighboring house, took the owner, a 59-year-old woman, hostage and barricaded himself inside. The situation lasted for 7 hours before Keith surrendered and released her. When Keith went to court, he showed he was anything but remorseful for his actions. During his trial, Ferguson appeared bored by the whole court process. He frequently cursed the judge, court officials, and everyone present.
Scan me? I'm not doing this in front of these stupid cameras, these inbreds.
Before the judge delivered his sentence, Tiffany's best friend, Carla Seating, read the victim's impact statement. She noted that Tiffany had been living in fear of Keith and that she knew that Keith was trouble. Here, Keith revealed that he had no desire to see or communicate with his kids again.
All right? Because of the respect and safety of my children, I'm not saying nothing because they're going to see this. They don't need to hear that.
Prompting Judge George Mertz to question his sanity. As part of a plea deal, Keith pleaded guilty to the murders of his wife and father-in-law, and the other 10 charges were dropped. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the chance of parole.
I'll see y'all in hell.
Just when you think humans cannot get any more humane, we meet one of the most malicious cases ever, Ronnie O'Neal III. This is 29-year-old Ronnie O'Neal III. Ronnie is in court for the double murder of his 9-year-old daughter, Ron Nevaeh O'Neal, and 33-year-old girlfriend, Kenyatta Barron, in Riverview, Florida. On the evening of March 18, 2018, Ronnie fatally shot Barron and struck his daughter multiple times with an axe until she was no longer with us.
Stumbling outside, and then I just saw my dad chase him, hit her with an axe. And then he went in the garage, I followed him. He put me on the ground, and then he had his foot on top. I was laying on my stomach, he had his foot on top of me.
He stabbed Ronnie O'Neal IV, his 8-year-old son, and critically wounded him. On the night of the murder, Barron called 911 screaming before suddenly hanging up. Less than 10 minutes later, Ronnie called 911, claiming to be attacked by white demons, and accused Barron of trying to kill him. He then gave his home address, but Ronnie didn't stop here. Believing they were all dead, Ronnie poured gasoline into the house and set it on fire. Fortunately, his son was able to escape with burns and stab wounds. Detective Mike Blair attended to him and ensured he was taken to the hospital. Luckily, he survived. After setting the house on fire, Ronnie fled, but the police were able to catch up with him, and he was arrested. If you thought someone that did such heinous crimes would try to act pleasant in front of a judge and jury who have his future in his hands, let this change your mind. Ronnie's trial began in 2021. He insisted on representing himself and was psychologically cleared to serve as his attorney. What happens next is hard to hear. During the trial, Ronnie cross-examined his son, who had fully recovered from the stab wounds and burns Ronnie inflicted on him, and is testifying as a witness for the prosecution.
I hurt you that night of this incident?
Yes.
I did. And how did I hurt you?
He stabbed me.
His son told the court the events surrounding the night of the tragedy. However, Ronnie claimed that his son had lied about the events and insisted that the recording the prosecution submitted as evidence was forged. Initially, Ronnie claimed that he was acting in self-defense and filed motions, but the judge rejected it. Ronnie was found guilty of 7 charges against him, including 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of aggravated child abuse, and 1 count of attempted first-degree murder. But he didn't put it to rest then. After his sentencing, Ronnie admitted that he wasn't sorry for his crimes.
I am not sorry for something I did, and I am not sorry for the things I did.
Before Ronnie was sentenced, Judge Michelle Cisco, who has been in the judicial sector for almost 20 years, said this.
This is the worst case I've ever seen as far as the facts go.
Ronnie was given 3 life sentences without the chance of parole. If you thought these cases were disrespectful, watch this.
I was crying, Daddy, Daddy. When I woke up, the whole house was in smoke.